cats. I note last month Council resolved to prepare a cat local law which will provide a regulatory framework for the ownership of cats. It's recommended that the submissions have been reviewed, and it's requested that Council make the City of Kalamunda Dog Local Law 2021.
Any questions, councillors? Councillor Boyd.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just wondering if the Director can elaborate a little bit further. I'm a little bit confused on point 4 of the recommendation with respect to the Chief Executive Officer undertaking a further review and community consultation in respect to dog exercise and prohibited areas, given that in the presentation it's indicated that we've already done that and we already have some information. So what are we seeking to do by doing another community consultation?
Through the Chair, some queries were raised by councillors and some queries were raised through community as well about certain parks being dog prohibited areas and maybe introducing and allowing dogs in some of those areas, and one of those was namely Sturt Park. And given that this was a review of the local law and the essence of making this local law was to bring our local laws up to contemporary standard, it wasn't a comprehensive review of dog exercise areas and where dogs are and aren't allowed and on and off leash areas and those sorts of things. That constituted and warranted its own engagement process. And while we did add 2 new dog exercise areas as part of this process, that was a logical inclusion given the infrastructure investment for dogs in those areas. So we did review in terms of introducing 2 new ones, but in terms of looking at dog prohibited areas and allowing dogs in those areas that are currently prohibited, that's a separate process we think warrants its own engagement program.
I have a question. Are guide dogs exempt from prohibited areas?
Through the Chair, my understanding is yes, they are.
Thank you. Are there any other questions, councillors? Are there any questions from the gallery regarding the dog local law? No. We will ask for the presentation on the local emergency management arrangements, please.
Thank you. The purpose of this report is for Council to endorse our local emergency management arrangement, acronym known as LEMA. LEMAs refer to the collection of emergency management documentation, systems, processes, guidelines and templates. It includes memorandums of understanding which affect the local government district in regards to its responsibilities in the recovery phase of an emergency. The emergency management arrangements are an overarching document. They're a template, as I stated, with associated sub-plans which local government's responsible for developing, maintaining and testing. The LEMA is required to be reviewed regularly with a major review to occur every 5 years, and this constitutes our major review. The LEMA was developed in collaboration with state agencies, namely DFES, our District Emergency Management Advisor and our Local Emergency Management Committee, to which our Mayor is the Chair, and the broader community. The LEMA was endorsed by the City's Emergency Management Committee earlier this year, and the draft document was used as a framework for the City's recovery response to COVID-19. It was quite a process for us to work through because the emergency management arrangements are generally geared for fires and floods. But a pandemic was thrown at our draft emergency management arrangement, and the documents, the pandemic plan and all those sorts of things are what fell out of the templates and the guidelines that are within our LEMA. So they did serve us well throughout the recovery phase of COVID-19, to which we're still in. The City received confirmation from our State Emergency Management Committee in October that the LEMA was reviewed by them and was in alignment with their preparedness procedures. It's recommended that Council endorse the local emergency management arrangements, but it's also acknowledged that this is a live document that provides templates and the like. There's lists in here of personnel and contacts for coordinators, emergency management coordinators, to utilise in the event of an emergency, and those personnel do change from time to time. So it is a live document that is updated on a regular basis, and the state government also release reviewed templates and guidelines, and they'd be embedded within the documents as part of any review that may not necessarily be presented to council. It's primarily operational. So the recommendation is that council endorse.
I noticed that we have local, district and state emergency committees. How do they work together, and does one override the other?
They're a layered approach, and the state is the highest level.
Okay.
It's the SEMC, and then it goes down to district and local.
Thank you. Are there any other questions, councillors? Are there any questions from the gallery? Thank you very much. Oh, there is a question from the gallery. Thank you. Could we ask somebody to... We'll just give them a minute, and then we will ask the Director of Asset Services to give his 2 presentations.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The first presentation is on our local biodiversity strategy draft, and I'd like to introduce Mr. Dallas Lynch, who is our Coordinator of Natural Areas for the City, who will be making this presentation tonight. I'll just bring Dallas the cooking device. Point and shoot to that screen. Just point and shoot anywhere towards us. Preferably not with weapons. Dallas, if you could press the button.
Thank you. Is that good? Through the chair, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which we meet today, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. The purpose of the report regarding the local draft biodiversity strategy is to seek the endorsement to proceed to public consultation on the draft Local Biodiversity Strategy 2020. Just for brief background, brief background on the strategy. In 2008, the city developed its first local biodiversity strategy, and as such was the first local government in Western Australia to adopt a strategy developed in accordance with the state government endorsed methodology for biodiversity conservation planning at a local level, and that's endorsed through the Environmental Protection Authority in 2008. So in doing so, the corporate business plan of 2018 to 22 identified the need to review and update the 2008 local biodiversity strategy, and this current draft is the product of that review. The vision of the draft strategy is that the City of Kalamunda and its community will protect, manage and value the local biodiversity to ensure a lasting legacy for future generations. Now, in developing this vision, the project working group, which consisted of the members of the Kalamunda Environmental Advisory Committee and internal staff, considered the vision of the 2008 strategy as relevant, and therefore only very minor changes occurred in that vision. The local draft strategy is the draft local biodiversity strategy is presented in 2 parts. The first part of the document is the summary document, which provides an overview of the current biodiversity status within the city and provides comments on its importance and the benefits of that biodiversity, and also recommends conservation actions to be taken. Part 2 of the document in its presentation is the technical report, which includes a comprehensive appendices including data, maps and tables, a report of the review of the Local Biodiversity Strategy 2008, a detailed description of the methodology used in the creation of the draft Local Biodiversity Strategy 2020, and the technical report also provides detail and instruction on how to access the mapping using an online GIS platform via LG Map at the West Australian Local Government Authority. The purpose of that is that there's some very complex data sort of illustrated in that mapping, and it's much better viewed through the GIS portal. Key points of the drafts, key points of the local biodiversity strategy include revised metrics regarding the threatened priority flora, fauna and ecological communities within the city. The presence of internationally recognised vegetation within the city of Kalamunda, and information regarding the amount of clearing that's happened since the 2008 biodiversity strategy. The local biodiversity strategy draft 2020 makes 5 key objectives for the delivery of the strategy. It includes 14 targets which have been identified by the strategy as key measures of success for its delivery. 25 key actions have been identified and prioritised to deliver the objectives and the targets of the strategy. The targets and the actions are to be achieved over the 10-year life of the strategy, 2021 to 2031 as proposed. In conclusion, a thorough process of the review of Local Biodiversity Strategy 2008 was undertaken. The data associated with the biodiversity within the City of Kalamunda and the data associated with the current strategic and statutory planning framework was reviewed and has led to a comprehensive and considered draft Local Biodiversity Strategy 2020. The Local Biodiversity Strategy 21 to 2031 will be further considered by Council for adoption after considering public comment and the provision of detailed analysis of the proposed actions of the draft strategy. In recommendation, we recommend that Council endorse the draft 2020 Kalamunda Local Biodiversity Strategy for the purpose of community consultation.
Thank you. Councillors, do you have any questions? Are there any questions from the gallery? No, thank you so much for presenting for us. And we move on to the Kalamunda Community Centre building project naming.
Just get the clicker back, please. Thank you, Dallas. Good evening, councillors, members of the public in attendance and all those listening live and watching us via YouTube. This report is regarding the naming of the building that's currently under construction in Yorgerson Park. So the report is to seek to council to determine the name of the community centre building. Just describing that engagement with the community has been undertaken to understand their preference for a name, and it is recommended that the new building is named the Kalamunda Community Centre. In the first part of our community engagement, a list of about 80 names were suggested by the community as to their ideas of what this building should be named. A panel of administrative staff from all parts of the city's administrative area were gathered to shortlist the names with the reasons why they were picked. It's set out in the report. So the 6 names under consideration were the Bibbulmun Community Centre, the Kalamunda Community Centre, the Kala Community Hub, Yorgerson Community Centre, Cardigan Community Centre and the Kalamunda Community Centre. We then went back to the community between August and September 2020 and asked the community basically 2 questions. Pick your favourite and then rank the 6 names in order of preference. 110 submissions were received. It was evident from both the pick your favourite and the ranking that the community preference was for the name Kalamunda Community Centre. So the recommendation is that council determine that the community use building currently nearing completion, I'm proud to say in Yorgerson Park, is named the Kalamunda Community Centre.
Questions, councillors? Any questions from the gallery? Thank you very much to the Director of Asset Services. Now we move on to the presentation by the Director of Corporate Services on the Central Mall upgrade. So we'll do the presentation and then we have two presentations from members of the community.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, councillors, members of the public and staff. I'm going to take you through the Kalamunda Arts Advisory Committee response to the city's Central Mall upgrade project and also the meeting minutes from the 9th of November CAC meeting. So at the 9th of November meeting, sorry, I'll go back a step. On the 26th of October 2020, the Director of Asset Services provided a presentation to the Arts Advisory Committee on the Central Mall upgrade project, inviting their initial feedback. Noting that the city's local planning policy 26, the public art contribution policy that was adopted by council last year, drew an allocation of $24,000 under that policy as a result of that project. The conceptual design that was presented was driven by landscape architects with the purpose of being able to better engage with the arts. As a consequence of that presentation, the Arts Advisory Committee formed, a small working group to have a look through and the presentation and provide some feedback back to council, which they've duly done. So the attached is a bit of a graphic, just providing some examples of some of the creative elements that are possible. It's in part informed by images for the concept plan, and other parts are more around just the types of options and some photography showing other possibilities in that space. So in terms of recommendations, in general the officer responses were supportive of most of the recommendations contained by the Arts Advisory Committee, although noting that some were identified as requiring council direction decision around additional scoping and additional budget allocation. So with that caveat, the recommendations are that we note the minutes of the 9th of November special council meeting, and we endorse the city's responses to the Kalamunda Arts Advisory Committee recommendations from their special council meeting. Thank you.
Before we go to questions, we have two presentations, so I will ask Kira Nicholson to come to give her presentation, and that will be followed by Mr. Andy Farron. Thank you very much.
Thank you for letting me come and have a more of a question than. Oh, thank you. More question than it is a presentation. I come from the background of design and access, so in looking at this in the artworks, my concern is the artworks that are there currently in regards to the landscaping are more of a hard structure than they are actually art as such. And my concerns are the separation from access when we've got our drives, our driveway and our public areas. If the instigation was taken on looking in the community communication rather than just looking at the specialised having a look at the current professionals that are in hand to open up the ideas of different artwork rather than a hard structure as such as a screened artwork, more of a statue in the areas to encourage, along with the landscaping, provide a separation between the allocated roadways and our sitting areas. Thank you.
would somebody like to make a comment on that?
Thank you,
Please,
through the
Director.
Chair. I think I might be able to fill this. Look, thank you, Kira, for your question. If I understand you correctly, you're asking us, have we determined the public art pieces yet? The answer is no, we haven't. That part of the project has yet to be undertaken of engaging the Public Art Commission and then subsequent the public art pieces. And if I also understand the second part of your question is that you would have a preference that whatever pieces are selected, they help to delineate between the roadway and the public gathering spaces. Is that correct? Okay, thank you very much for those questions. And yes, I can assure you that yes, we have not engaged the public artists yet, so we haven't shown anything because there's nothing to show at this point in time. And thank you for your suggestion of using it as a manner of separating the roadway from the public space. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Kira. Could we invite Mr. Andy Farrant to come and talk to us, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you too for your acknowledgement of country tonight and acknowledgement of the traditional owners, and I too would like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'm speaking, councillors, to you in my role as the chair of the Arts Advisory Committee rather than as a there's a word, rather as a general member of the community. Councillors, it's great that this development, the first development in central Kalamunda, well, in the city for over 30 years, the city has control over, is taking place. The Arts Committee, however, is fearful that based on the briefing that's received and the response to the recommendations that are written before you and the lack of engagement with the Advisory Committee and the art strategy for this project, we'll end up with a singularly disappointing outcome. The committee is concerned that while the job may be done on time, it will be a 30-year reminder of a lost opportunity. Just over 5 months ago, the budget for the city was approved, and the upgrade of Central Mall was also approved at the same meeting. This project's main focus was to take the first step in the Central Kalamunda activation plan, to build new people attracting areas in the town centre and to create local employment. These were very current topics in June this year, into the teeth of the gale of COVID. I call the debate on that night the special council meeting of June 30, as I'm sure many of you do as well. The recommendations before you are the outcome of a special meeting as being described already by the Director. The Arts Committee had the briefing, the Working Party met, and the Arts Committee reconvened for a special meeting within, I think, just 10 days, which is moving at local government light speed. We actually had hoped, at the encouragement of the CEO, to be able to have this response to Council for the last Council meeting. I'm not quite sure why there was a delay. In the response contained in your briefing notes, the committee was disappointed with the range of proposed design elements presented and was clear in its mind that the project, if continued in its current trajectory, would not deliver best impact and value for the city's community, nor in its role as a visitor attractor. As its chair, I'm happy to acknowledge that in the recommendations before you, the committee may not have been as clear as it could be. However, councillors, what has become clear from the staff's responses that you see is that the city's staff do not understand the opportunity that the arts offers the city. The arts strategy, which the council adopted over a year ago, sets out in clear actions and responses, and none of these have been included in the process of the mall development. There's been no input from the beginning of the project by a city-employed professional artist to be part of the design team, which is a key outcome from the arts in the arts strategy. And there are also considerations as well as that design element in other considerations in placemaking, and certainly not in the project's budgeting. The error I think the Arts Committee has made is that we assumed that city staff understood the full potential of the arts sector and the many things that it offers the city in a wide range of core operational areas. We had, incorrectly, assumed that staff had read and understood the arts strategy, understood the 3 key focus areas and the 17 actions and the long list of existing city policies and strategies to which the arts can add value. The response to the committee's recommendations is disappointing. The description of the tree-like structures in the schematics provided, the elevated awnings, the strings of buntings that apparently mirror the movement of leaves above open areas, and the confusion between what is public art and what is good design, great placemaking to create what I think has been a word known in this chamber as sticky areas that are attractive but also distinct of our area, missing. And what we have are relatively functional and frankly very disappointing designs and concepts at the moment. This project is 5 months into its development. Councillors, you approved the art strategy's vision, and this includes the following statement: to place creative practice at the heart of the city's communities and neighbourhoods, to add the city to the city's visual appeal and to strengthen its sense of place, the diversity of its economy, and to elevate the arts practice as accessible, challenging and engaging. Furthermore, the strategy's statement of commitment to the community is, and I quote again, to place a high value on arts at its core work and core work and services, so that it is a truly creative organisation able to meet the community's needs. And I'm afraid the response to our recommendations in the documentation before you falls short of these statements and vision. The response to the city's recommendations demonstrate that these commitments made by Council are not in evidence in this project. Councillors, the urgency of this project that's been placed on staff is set in their KPIs, and Council has set those KPIs. If Central Mall redevelopment is rushed, the risk of it not meeting community expectations will be greatly increased. The opportunities for value for money will be reduced, and another development in the city, this one 100% in the city's control, will miss the mark. A breather is recommended to remove the project risk and to properly engage the art strategy in redrawing the project, and a redrawing of the project budget will be required. The strategy, councillors, came well before this project hit the drawing boards. Had the elements of the strategy, particularly in key focus area 1, been adopted, there would have been a professional artist involved before any pen hit paper on this project. That is evident too, as is the confusion between the focus on public art as opposed to functional other elements of attractiveness that great design in public places brings. So the committee is not at the moment focused at all on the public art. It is focused on delivering a central mall that is the best possible outcome, that attracts people, that keeps people there. And the approach that we took as as the Working Party responded to the briefing we received was a bit like many of you councillors I'm sure have taken, which is when you're either designing a home that you're building or renovating your home. What's it going to look like? We didn't quite go to what are the colour of the tiles going to be, but we did go into detail because there were so many elements missing. And the sense that the committee has at the moment is that the horse has bolted pretty much on this project for meaningful input from the Arts Advisory Committee, which you commissioned. I seek that the council not endorse the staff report as written, and I'm sorry to disagree with the director. In conversations with two directors and the CEO yesterday, it was made clear that many of those recommendations were at variance with the committee's view were at variance with the staff recommendations. I'm happy to go through them one by one if you'd like, Madam Mayor.
I think all councillors have probably read them. My question is, and I think the problem here is that we only have $24,000. So if we employ an artist to be part of the design team, that's probably going to take all of that, and then we wouldn't have any money left for the actual art. Do you want to comment on that?
Absolutely. The employment of an artist is not a public art function. It is a design function at the beginning of all city projects. If you look at, and let me just read it to you, Madam Mayor. It's item 1.6 in the key in the three key focus areas. It says engage key creative specialists. This action will inform and enliven all 6 parts of a development and planning processes for future developments and renewal projects. The City creates a consultancy panel of experienced qualified personnel who will work in-house with in-house staff and other contracted consultants as an equal professional who contributes to all elements of the planning and design process.
Follow-up question, Mr. Farrett. Are you seeking that council budget more funds for this project to allow more art?
For 2 reasons, Councillor. First of all, to enable a bit of a catch-up. And the public art issue is actually not a conversation, and it's mentioned in the context of this report is actually a bit of a furphy. The Arts Committee didn't discuss public art at all. And that's what I'm saying. The staff are confused between the policy of public art, and they've demonstrated that they don't actually understand that the role the arts can play in developments. So there are a couple of reasons why the budget should be increased. First of all, to take on the cost of a professional artist and to do catch-up late in the piece. I suspect that there may well be a project pause cost for existing consultants who have been working on the project. And I would also say into the teeth of the state government's infrastructure investment, where the national infrastructure, hang on, let me get the right name of it, briefly referenced in the Australian Chamber of Commerce, was a report that identified the National Infrastructure Investment Advisory Body had identified over $110 billion of active investment being made by the state government through its budget processes that will take place in the next 18 months. Anyone who can hold a spanner, wield a spirit level, or drive a truck will be charging rates that I don't think will meet the current budget.
Councillors, do you have any
Yes, I do, Madam Chair.
other questions? Councillor Giardina.
Look, I'm certainly interested, Mr. Farrett, in the design concept of it. I think the public art stuff that can all always be added to it, to the project as we go along. I don't see that as a major issue at the moment. But the design of it, I have an interest in how we start that and get it right from the word go. I know that we have got artists, a lot of talent in our community. Would there be any that are interested in coming on board and doing some work with our staff at free of charge? Because I know that we have got people out there that do that. As an artist, do you think they would be able to do that for us? Give us some advice on what they think, you know, on that panel.
Through the chair, one of the responses, one of the phrases in the report that did raise some shackles was the phrase professional or volunteer. Artists are professionals, like all of us in this room. I've made my living for the last 25 years working in the arts. It's been a long time since I picked up a musical instrument in anger, but I've worked in the arts as an arts worker. You don't expect your Cruise councillor to fix potholes for nothing. We don't expect you as a community to sign up to be a councillor and do it for nothing. Artists are professionals. And so I would say there
are people out there that are retired that would love to be on board on something like this. It doesn't have to be someone
I would strongly recommend, if I may, councillor, that the same principles of professional artists with track records, who are, whether they're retired or not, their employment status is neither here nor there. I would suggest that the city may get best value out of the professionals in the city rather than those who have retired. I think it is naive, if I may, councillor, to actually think that in the same way that you're not retired as you sit around this table, to expect that anybody would actually work in that environment and under those circumstances.
Okay.
Always, there's a bottom line in the work that I've done, councillor. Always pay the artist first, because they're the ones who earn between $15,000 and $28,000 a year through their creativity. I don't know that many people around this room could live on that money.
Mr. Farron, I have a question. If council, this is a hard question, you may not have an answer, but perhaps you could give us some idea.
I'll do my best.
If councillors wanted to incorporate what the Arts Committee suggests, what sort of extra money would they need to budget for in Central Mall?
I'm not a quantity surveyor, so we're on really shaky ground there, councillor.
This is just a guess, and we take it as that.
I would think. Can I turn to the Director of Assets for a minute? The delivery date plus 3 to 6 months, Director, for the completion of this project would be from today's date onwards. When would that be? If I'm sorry, through the Chair.
Through the Chair, thank you. The construction period for this project is notionally 6 months duration. The construction start date is very much dependent on when we resolve the final design for documentation and tender. I stress what we're at the moment is the concept design. We are a long way home before we get home to a tender design. There's a lot of refinement and works to be done, and that'll be largely in future decisions of council whether or not we progress this design, start again, or augment some of the project scope for additional elements as suggested by the Kalamunda Arts Advisory Committee. Please, may I also take this opportunity just to make 2 comments if I could. Mr Farron has suggested that public art was not part of the deliberations or discussions of the CAC. I refer them to recommendation 4, that they recommended that the public arts funds allocated to this project, 24,000, be used for artist fees. So they've already spoken to the public art component of the project, so we refute that statement. The second part of Mr Farron's observations is perhaps with the current level of economic activity that the project will not be delivered on budget due to anyone that could hold a spanner, drive a truck, etc., inflate their prices. I'll just go by observation of current construction tenders that the city is doing and assessing are all coming in within budget expectations that were set some time ago. So we're not seeing a significant uplift in pricing at the moment for tenders that the city's putting out.
Thank you. So the purpose of my question, Mr Farron, is to give councillors something to think about. And if they don't have some idea, even if that idea is not accurate, then they don't have enough to think about.
I would suggest that to bring an artist in for a period of time as described, there may be, look, I'm making this up, but up to $25,000. It depends on how much work is required in catch-up. And this is a project, as I said, had that part of the art strategy been acted upon at the beginning of this project, then that fee would have been part of the project fee. in terms of any other variation. So really what I'm saying is let's slow the project down. Let's not just do a job. Let's not focus on what has to be done. Let's focus on how it needs to be done and why it needs to be done for best value for the community. In terms of any other costs, I'm not quite sure what those other costs might be. But I am saying, councillors, certainly please slow the project down for the time being. And also, in the meeting yesterday, I understood that there is 103, I think it was, projects in the department, in the Director of Assets workbook at the moment, and it was pretty clear from some of the conversation too that there are high stakes going on at the moment, and I think perhaps councillors pushing things through, push may not be in the best long-term interests of staff.
Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Andy, you alluded to some alternate recommendations. I think there's 10 that the officers put forward. Are you able to email those to councillors?
We've not written alternate recommendations, but I've got a list here of responses to those recommendations. I probably don't want to take up the briefings. I mean, I can go through those one by one, perhaps at another time, Madam Mayor, but I don't know if that helps.
So that's what I was referring to. So those responses to the officers' recommendations.
So our response is twofold: slow the project down, review the budget, and draw in the elements. If I can just find in my notes, there are about 9 elements of the strategy as it stands that could be applied in this project that have not been applied.
Are there any other questions, councillors? Do you have a follow-up question, Councillor O'Connor? Are there any other questions? Councillor Giardina?
I'll turn it into a question, but look, I think Mr Farrell can cast his mind back when we built the Zigzag Centre, and we used local artists at the time, and Jenny BM was one of them. They come on board, I think there was about 2 or 3 of them at the time that participated with our staff, and they were local artists, and they'd done it as a volunteer thing. So that's where I'm coming from. I don't mean to be disrespectful to anybody. I just want to sort of make that observation to you, where I'm coming from. So,
if I may, Madam Chair, through the Chair, Jenny Bean is an arts worker, and as a community member was involved in the making of the very large and very valuable stained glass window in the library. That was a community project that was led by a professional artist. Her name is Cedar Prest, and that stained glass window, I understand, is certainly one of the largest stained glass windows in the country. And the community, you know, there may well be work in this project that is artist-led, but where the making of it is done by the community. That's not what we're disputing. But I'm saying that a professional artist who has standing in the community. If I can just perhaps remind you too, Councillor, because I know that we've talked about this. The benchmark for the Arts Committee for urban developments that do involve great creative processes is Ellenbrook. Not just because of the public art, but because of the way in which that project, 25 or more years old now, in one of the first people engaged as part of the design team was an artist. And she's been there all the way through. Her name's Phillip Robrand. She lives in Darlington. She has been there for those 25 or more years, working with the design team as a respected person who has been listened to. She's done historical research. She's done a whole range of plant and other natural features research that has informed not only the design of the place, but also in many elements, some of the public art as well. That's the benchmark. The City of Kalamunda, the important adoption of the public art policy last year we were, I think, in the last 2% of Greater Perth's local governments to adopt that arts policy. So there is, and you would have heard me say this before, there is 25 years of investment by developers in how this city looks through public art that has gone. So we are a long way behind. Many other places are.
Thank you very much for coming to speak to us, councillors. No more questions. Are there any questions from the gallery of either the officer or Mr. Farrant? No, thank you so much. Yes, Mr. Forrest, you have a question? Who is your question directed to, Mr. Forrest?
Is directed to the director. As I understand it, the situation at the moment is the whole concept is out for public consultation. The concept of Central Mall, it's out for public consultation. A draft has been put out, but the director seems to have talked to the Arts Committee quite early in this. Might be a good idea. I have no objection with what Andy's talking about. But the thing is, whether a road goes through the middle, whether it includes the area down to Barber Street, which is all used for the markets, that issue seems to me to be unresolved. And perhaps the director could update you on where that consultation stands at the moment.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'll ask our manager of Customer and Public Relations to respond regarding the status of the consultation, including when the CAC was brought into the public consultation timeframe, if I could.
Thank you very much for the question. Confirming that the City of Kalamunda has commenced community consultation on the draft design. We've undertaken a number of workshops, including an online workshop, and part of the presentation to the Arts Advisory Committee was in that early stages of public consultation. Consultation has now concluded, and we are reviewing all of the feedback that has came in and working with the team to actually provide that feedback through to the design consultant's place laboratory.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I might now, address the second part of the question from Mr. Forrest regarding the design going into Barber Street. That is not correct. The scope of this project is Central Mall. Central Mall is one part of the overall activity centre plan for the City of Kalamunda, and the section between Central Mall down to Barber Street is known as the Town Square. That is a separate piece of streets of the development, which is not yet being commenced. It's not included in this scope of works.
Thank you very much. Could we move on to get two presentations by the Coordinator of Community Services? The first one is social inclusion.
Thank you, Madam Chair, councillors and members, staff and members of our community. Today I'm going to talk to you about social inclusion report. The purpose of this report is for council to gain an understanding of social inclusion within the city, to accept the investigation report, and also to support the planning and development of the social inclusion plan. So back in August 2019, a notice of motion was put forth for city officers to investigate and prepare a report on social inclusion, to review what other local governments were doing and how they address the topic, to identify gaps in service delivery, and then to make recommendations to the city's role to address the identified gaps that we came and found. Social inclusion is the art of ensuring that people feel welcomed and celebrated for exactly who they are. It's about people being able to participate in society, creating conditions for equal opportunities for all. During the last few months, we've done a consultation process where we've gone out to other local governments in the area and found out what they're doing in regards to social inclusion in their local governments. We've had direct contact with officers. We've also gone out to not-for-profits, our agencies and our service providers, and surveyed them, asking them the same questions, what they have been doing in regards to social inclusion. We've had one-on-one calls with our service providers and had presentations at all our community sessions. We've also consulted with our community via our social media platforms and delivered surveys to our community groups and disseminated those at workshops, asking the questions of what our community believed social inclusion was and what it meant to them. As a local government, we have 4 areas of 4 pillars that we've come up with that we can do as a local government, and those 4 areas are to be inclusive, to connect our community to the city and also to our services, for our staff to be educated and our community to be educated on local services and what our local service providers actually provide, and to be able to advocate on behalf of our community to our local services to bring some of those service provisions into the city. We're proposing a social inclusion plan which will sit under the strategic community plan, which will cover the 3 or 2 current plans that we have, which is our disability access and inclusion plan, our age-friendly strategy, and then the findings from our social inclusion investigation. So the actual plan will have the 7 areas of the DATE, which is our disability access and inclusion plan, so make sure we cover those 7 strategies, our 8 domains within our age-friendly plan, and then the 4 pillars that I previously spoke about. The officer recommendation will be that Council endorse the results of the community engagement plan as per the report. Number 2, note the community directory, and 3, endorse the officer proposal to develop the community access and inclusion plan, which will include the deliverables from the DATE, the age-friendly plan, social inclusion, and our Kalamunda Connected Active Citizens plan.
Questions, councillors? I've got a question. It's probably in the report, and I apologise if that. So how many responses did we get from our community engagement?
From the community or
From the community?
Yep, so for the actual community, we had just over 160, and that was from various cohorts within our community. So we targeted youth, we did seniors with disabilities, we've covered all areas of community for that.
Excellent. Are there any other questions, councillors? Councillor Cooper.
Thank you for your presentation there. I was just wondering, the directory, how is that provided to the community?
So currently, through the Chair, currently the directory is online, so that's being updated as we go, and as service providers and community are asking us to add to what we're doing. We also have hard copies that are out in our libraries. I've disseminated some to some service providers and service areas. As people are learning about it, then we're starting to disseminate it more with them. And that'll be an ongoing tool, not just a one-off printed copy.
And my second question is, compared to other local governments, are we up there or way behind, or I hope you understand that question?
I do. Out of the local governments that were surveyed, no other local governments actually have a social inclusion plan currently, so I would say that we are up there in being forward-thinking. A couple of local governments are investigating this way, and the Department of the Communities, who we report to for our DAPE, are encouraging us to go this way. We're becoming more inclusive rather than saying it's 3 separate plans that we're delivering to.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions, councillors? Are there any questions from the gallery? We have a question from Kira Nicholson.
Just a question in relation to the report in dealing with the inclusion. Is the report looking at, I'm sort of jumping a bit forward here, is the report going to be looking at how you can actually advise councillors in any new developments, not just looking at community spaces, but also how do you get from a community space into an actual property, or from that property out onto driveway? So I'm talking about footpaths, your public access spaces. So if someone then gets out of a bus,
then accesses to, say, the shops and those sort of areas, actually looking at when we're designing spaces, inclusivity includes not only a wheelchair but also our visual and auditory issues. And also making the, question also is in regards to the report looking at including the new livable housing guidelines and NDIS guidelines into council's main designs for housing rather than just your R codes.
I'm not sure whether that should be directed to the coordinator or the Director of Development Services.
I think, Nadine, you could handle the first part about the disability access and inclusion plan, which covers off that part.
Perfect.
And then the director can deal with the R codes.
Great, thank you through the chair. That's exactly what I was going to say. Under the current date, so we have obviously our 7 strategies and the access and inclusion is covered through that. There wouldn't be any change to that because that is legislation. So as a local government, we have to abide by our current date. The other question over to you,
Director of Development Services.
Through the chair, disability access and the like, access for all kinds is governed generally by either the residential design codes in terms of residential development or the building code of Australia. There's minimum standards in terms of access for disabilities and the like.
Follow-up question?
Yeah, question in the difference between the NCC and the new codes. Doing inclusive, my question is, when we're looking at new developments, we don't know how many people are going through the estates or what is happening to a person thereafter. If, as a forward-thinking community, would it not be beneficial with part of this report to actually look at including the livable housing guidelines to encourage people who have lower economics or have restrictions in access, the ability that knowing that if they go and buy any properties from a new development, that the council has implemented any of these guidelines, that if they are coming and buying stock that has been built, they have the ability to rent or buy a house that already has those inclusions rather than NCC, which has step entries and stuff like that, which is then looking at our livable housing guidelines over the top.
Director?
Through the chair, the design of new housing estates and the like is governed by contemporary planning policy, which draws influence from various codes and guidelines at a national level to provide accessibility for all, be it disability or otherwise. Yep. So new estates are built with shared paths of a certain width to accommodate movement assistance and those sorts of things. Roads of a certain width, disabled parking bays of contemporary standard with new commercial developments and the like. The building code and other guidelines do prescribe infrastructure that's built to be of a certain standard to accommodate those contemporary requirements, which from my perspective I think we've come a long way from 20, 30 years ago in terms of how a building's designed and who that building and who those buildings are designed for. It'd be difficult to prescribe certain guidelines outside of those nationally recognised that already influence planning policy and building policy. So to speak, it wouldn't be appropriate for the city to trailblaze a new standard. I think there's national standards and the like that prescribe requirements, and it would be quite difficult to impose anything over and above those national standards or national guidelines. But I do take your point that as part of planning new estates, ensuring accessibility, be it on a footpath, be it on a road, connecting our public transport assets and ensuring people that may not necessarily be able to use a vehicle or in close proximity to public transport and those sorts of things from a planning perspective, we certainly embrace those principles and have that at the forefront of our planning. And we have new estates being planned adjacent to the station at High Wycombe, and accessibility and those sorts of things are paramount in the design of that new estate. We also have strategies such as the city's bike plan that look at linking bicycle plan that look at linking arterials and linking those arterials to public transport assets to provide access opportunities for all. So my comment, in short, is that I wouldn't be using this document as a process to implement new guidelines over and above national standards, but I can assure you and the broader community that access at all levels is paramount in all of our urban design and planning processes, and that's evident by our most recent structure planning for new suburbs and the like that's come through this council.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. And now we invite the coordinator back to tell us about the Disability and Carers Committee. Thank you, Nadine.
Thank you. The second report, I'll just flick you on. The second report that I'm putting forth is the appointment of the DACAC, which is our Disability and Carers Advisory Committee. So currently we have the terms of reference allows for 8 members on that committee. The city has received a resignation from a member who was representing one of our local organisations. Following that resignation, the officer who's in that position now, her replacement from Mission Australia, has requested to come and join the committee. So I'm recommending that council accept the resignation of Chantel and appoint Rebecca from Mission Australia, her replacement, as the the representative from community organisation on DACAC.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Thank you very much. And I would like to invite our Manager of Customer and Public Relations to give us 3 presentations, starting with Kalamunda Community Centre fees and charges.
Hello, thank you very much. Yes, I've got a couple of reports for you tonight. The first one is in relation to the Kalamunda Community Centre. So as such, when the budget was adopted for 2020-2021, we weren't at a position at that point in time to actually set fees for the Kalamunda Community Centre. We've undertaken quite a body of work in consulting with the members of the current learning centre, also some of the other user groups of the previous facility, and we've also undertaken some benchmarking with other local governments, along with an assessment of all of our current fees for other facilities. So we are now in a position to present some fees, and we are seeking adoption by council because we're actually starting to get lots of interest, and we're really keen to start to take some bookings and bring some revenue in for the new centre. So this particular report has 2 aspects for your consideration. The first is actually looking to adopt the proposed fees for each of the parts of the centre, and the second is to consider a fee waiver request from the Kalamunda Community Learning Centre. So I've included a copy of the proposed fees in the report, and it is on your screen as well. I'm happy to take any questions on those proposed fees. In the report at point 8, I've also given you a snapshot of some of our other venues and the fees for those. I would note that the city didn't budget any fee revenue from the Kalamunda Community Centre for 2020-2021, so that means that any fees that we bring in will actually be additional, so it's going to be good for the budget and it's going to keep everybody happy in that regard, and we're getting lots of inquiries, so we're quite excited in that regard. Now, just moving on to the second part of my report, we've been doing a lot of work with the Kalamunda Community Learning Centre, who, as I know many of you are aware, have been strong advocates for the centre's development. They've got more than 800 members. This year, due to COVID, they've actually held off on recommencing their classes, and as such, they've put forward a proposal for us, and I've included it as an attachment to this report, that they would like to not charge fees for their members for the first part of 2021. So what I'm seeking is a fee waiver for the Learning Centre from when the centre opens, which we're expecting to be around March, through till 30th of June. So really it's only the equivalent of 1 term. but it would allow that group to re-establish, given that they've had quite a lot of disruption, and kind of bring their new members back in. It has also had a really significant financial impact because, as you will be aware, the group is relatively self-sustaining. They're completely volunteer-driven except for their creche workers. And of course, with no income from their membership fees, they have had a financial impact this year as a result of COVID. So the city has reviewed their position, and we've had a number of meetings with the representatives from the Learning Centre, and we are actually supporting their proposal for a fee waiver for 2020-2021. We've also had some early discussions with them in relation to their financial capability moving forward, and they've indicated to us that they will be back in a position to be able to pay fees equivalent to those types of fees they were paying for their bookings previously, which equate to about $25,000 a year. So they're not seeking for this to be a long-term arrangement, and they're certainly wanting to get back to a position where they are paying for the facility accordingly. There is a strong social benefit to the operation of the Learning Centre, which I know that you're all very well aware of in terms of reducing social isolation and the role that they play for the community. So pursuant to a number of relevant sections of the Act, we're looking to approve that fee waiver request and to also adopt those fees and charges.
I'll start off the questions. Can you just make a comment between the difference between community and commercial with a couple of examples? What would be commercial?
No problem at all. Commercial might be a private booking for a business. A commercial might be a wedding that was going to be held, for example, in the main hall, or a birthday party could be considered commercial potentially. A community will most likely be a community group or something of that nature, so not for profit. An organisation that's meeting. The Darling Range Naturalist Club, who previously met, would be an example of a community group hire. The Kalamunda Community Learning Centre would also be an example of a community group hire. The one thing I would flag there is any of our seniors groups under our current schedule of fees and charges would also receive a 50% discount on that community group hire rate. So the city is really offsetting and providing facilities for its community at an extremely low cost, in my opinion. And I have noted in the report that that doesn't actually cover all of the maintenance costs, because I think that it's important that community understands that actually council and the city is providing a significant service in the provision of community facilities for such purposes.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, Nicole. I couldn't find the figure. How close is the fee waiver figure to the, I don't know, use the example of the History Village video of $5,000. How close is the fee waiver expected to be?
Thank you very much. I'm not sure in relation to how I would compare that to the History Village video. They're kind of separate issues. The reason that I haven't included a specific waiver is because the total cost would be calculated once all of their bookings are set. Given that council hasn't adopted a schedule of fees and charges, it's actually difficult to determine, because if I put a figure in for the fee waiver and then there was a change to the schedule, it actually wouldn't equate. So with no official adopted fees, I chose to leave the amount out. However, we have done some indicative planning with them based on the courses that they're expecting to offer, and we would expect it will be approximately $7,000.
Are there any other questions, councillors? Would you like to move on to the next report, please? The Darling Range Seniors Hub fee waiver request.
I'm happy to. I did wonder if the Director of Corporate Services wanted to make a comment. No? Okay. Thanks. Okay, so in relation to the Darling Range Seniors Hub, I've also attached a copy of the letter that we've received from the Hub. So I'm bringing this report to Council because the Hub have requested...
Excuse me, Manager, I just want to remind everyone that this has got two declarations of interest for impartiality on this particular item.
Thank you. Continue.
Thank you very much, Madam CEO. So the purpose of the report is to consider a request for a fee waiver from the Darling Range Seniors Hub. The Hub is a grassroots community organisation. They're relatively newly established and they have been utilising a private premises, as I understand it, at quite significant cost, so it's not sustainable for them ultimately to maintain, as I understand it. They have attended the Jack Healy Centre and have reviewed the space that the Kalamunda Community Learning Centre have currently been using as an interim office while the new building was being built. So some of you will be aware of that space as being referred to the old lounge room of the Jack Healy Centre, and they have requested to utilise that space. It's been predominantly unutilised, and so there is no impact on other potential user groups. They've also asked to hire or to utilise the dining room area for morning tea type facilities, and so we have calculated, based on the activity that they've indicated that they would like to utilise, and we're looking at a potential fee waiver to the value of $6,023.20, and would just note that the city is also looking to work with the Hub to actually increase their financial sustainability moving forward, and should they wish to utilise any other venues or any other locations additional. So for example, they've recently hired and paid for the main hall for a larger event, that we would be expecting that those would be payments. So this fee waiver would only cover the office space and the dining room, and any additional bookings would actually be required to be paid for.
Are there any questions? Councillor Cooper.
Thanks, Nicole. I'm just wondering, would there be any other groups that are going to be also asking for fee waivers coming up?
So I'm not aware of any others, but obviously as they come forward, we do sometimes need to bring them to council. There were a number of groups that actually asked, so at the Woodlapine Hub, there were a number of groups who asked just before the adoption of the schedule of fees and charges, and so they were actually added. You might know in the schedule we have a rules section, and there's a number of groups that already have fee waivers within the City of Kalamunda, and so that is available through the schedule. As our seniors groups also receive the 50% discount, we're not expecting any additionals, and we would expect usually that it comes about as part of considerable discussions with the city before we see something like this. Most of them are much smaller, so usually it might be that there's a particular event that they're having and it's going to be $100 or $150 and they're looking for support, but because these two were quite significant, we feel that it's important to bring them to council.
Councillor Billich.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, I would like to know how many members that the Hub have, and do the members pay an annual fee?
Thank you very much for the question. I'll take that on notice. I understand that there's about 80 associates, but I'd like to confirm that for you and come back before OCM, please, Councillor Billich.
Yes, that's fine.
Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's loosely related, but can the Director please remind me when is the next opportunity for Council to reconsider or amend fees and charges? Is that at the mid-year budget review?
Through the chair, fees and charges can be amended during the course of the year by a resolution of council, but more formally, you're quite right, through the quarterly or mid-year reviews is a typical time that they can come through.
There's an advertising component with fees and charges other than at budget adoption time, or we don't have to advertise at budget time, but during the year we do, don't we? There's an advertising component under the Local Government Act.
Through the chair, the advertising is that once the council agrees to them, the council advertises that they've been imposed and when they apply from. So there's no consultation process.
Thank you. I don't think there's any other questions, so we will ask you to talk about the Kalamunda Annual Show funding, and then we have a presentation from Mr. Wayne Garwood.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The City of Kalamunda has received a request from the Kalamunda Agricultural Show, so the Kalamunda Agricultural Society and the Show Committee, who are seeking funding for $20,000 for the Kalamunda Annual Show. The city has been a long-term supporter of the show. However, funding was not allocated, as you're aware, in the 2019-2020 COVID crisis budget, which was adopted in June 2020. The City of Kalamunda has very carefully considered this particular request and has also had discussions with Mr Wayne Garwood, the chairman of the committee, in terms of the viability and some of the support that they might require. We've also been working very, very closely with Exec in relation to financial sustainability and ensuring that we can make recommendations to council that are prudent. So the city is actually recommending support of the request to the value of $10,000 only, and with funding proposed to be utilised from the budget 2020-2021 surplus funds. So slightly different to one of the earlier reports came out was actually suggesting that we may need to, or we were looking at the reserves, but we can actually utilise surplus funds for this particular recommendation. The 2021 event is due to be the 122nd show, and it is one of the largest community events in the district. So historically, we've also taken a bit of a look back over the last decade, and funding has ranged between $10,000 up to the $20,000, and we understand that there was a spike in funding the year that we had to deal with a situation where there was an electrocution of an animal on the grounds, and so that was a point in time where funding was actually increased. We're looking at a recommendation to approve a payment of $10,000 and to amend the 2020-2021 budget. I would also note that we were recently successful for a COVID SAFE grant from Auspire to the value of about $11,000, which will provide the city with a number of COVID event safe materials that we can reuse for other events, and we are proposing to actually provide those to the show should it go ahead as a part of our support. So the city would also have an in-kind contribution.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the manager? Thank you. Perhaps we could get your comment, Mr Garwood.
Madam Mayor, councillors, it's been a tough year for the show because we had to cancel this year 3 weeks from the show, and we suffered severely financially, and it took almost as long to unravel the show as to prepare. But we're back on our feet again at the moment. So we're looking at the funding, and the $20,000 that we received in the past few years we use for entertainment, and it only covers, we have a budget of about $25,500 for entertainment, but that's many components. It's the stage, activities for children, and particularly participant activities for children. And that's a key thing we've been working on with the show for the last few years, providing as many free activities for children as we can. The children, actually patrons, children comprise 45% of the attendance, so it's a big component of the show, and there's probably another 500 children who actually assist with the show in different activities. So it's very important to the community with involving the children. So that's where the appeal is. That not having the full 20,000, we're definitely going to have to slash our entertainment budget.
Councillors, do you have any questions? Councillor Ritchie.
Good evening, Wayne, through the chair. I'm just wondering if you could give us an idea of how many people in a normal year would attend the show?
Average about 7,500. That's patrons.
Are there any other questions?
Are they mostly local, Graham? Mostly local, are they?
Mostly local, but we've done previous surveys, and there's actually patrons come from the whole greater metropolitan area, but a smaller percentage. So it has the profile.
I'm aware of that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming to speak to us.
Okay.
Thank you.
thanks.
And the last, we welcome Councillor Cannon, who's been at a graduation. Our last presentation is by the Director of Development Services on the Zigzag Railway Restoration proposal.
Thank you. Through the chair, you may notice I'm not the Director of Development Services.
Sorry.
He ran away. Oh no, he ran back in again. So this report actually is a composite of activities undertaken by all parts of the city, so it doesn't really belong in any one directorate, but I'm pleased to provide the presentation here tonight for the council and the community. So the purpose of the report is to advise council of matters that would need consideration by the proponents of any proposed zigzag railway restoration project. For the purposes of the report, I'll just say train because it's a bit of a mouthful. This report's addressing the notice of motion adopted at the September 2020 Ordinary Council meeting that the city prepare a set of issues and constraints regarding the train project. It's recommended that the council note these issues raised in the report and provide them to the Perth Zigzag Railway Association Incorporated for their information and dealing. The attachment to the report details the matters quite extensively identified by the city if this proposal is to be presented to the council to be considered further. Generally speaking, it falls into the following categories of transport and traffic, environmental issues, land tenure, safety, including bushfire risk, the community amenity, and the last point being business/risk, and that has a bit of an asterisk beside it. In terms of the most significant issues that have been identified in this assessment, is understanding the regulatory framework allowing the train to operate on public roads. The proposal, as we understand it, has parts of the route that crosses roads, we understand that, but parts of it are proposed to drive along public roads. And we need to understand better from the, specifically the Department of Transport, what regulatory framework would be in place for if that to happen. Secondly, we need to understand what appears to be significant impacts upon the natural environment, especially the proposed very large deck car park restaurant on Zigzag Scenic Drive and how that impacts the flora and fauna below it, and how the train, called it Perway, called it the through route, how that impacts the existing railway reserve, which is largely grown back with a lot of flora and fauna since it was abandoned as a train line back in the day. Certainty that existing buildings will not be impacted. Whilst the route is indicative, obviously detail survey later on may indicate that some buildings might be impacted by the route for the train. Similarly, land tenure. The city doesn't own every piece of land in the city, and the route and potential facilities may impact land that is controlled by the state government or, in extreme cases, private hands. The bushfire risk, it can be summed up essentially as to the association has promoted and produced evidence of this new eco train. What our concern is, the Bushfire Act can give the authority to ban machinery movements in high fire danger days when they're declared, or allow those types of machinery that have an exemption. So we just need to understand what path that's going to, the train can understand and address the bushfire risk. The final couple of points, the visual amenity of the system, vehicle access, especially for roads and residents where the train is going to travel along, and noise impacts. We don't understand those as yet, and certainly that will be coming out in due course as the project proposal is developed. And finally, we would be asking for a full business case, but only if the city was asked to be a funding or resource partner. We treat this as an analogy that if a business wanted to operate in the city and was seeking council permission, we don't delve into their business plans. That's their business. It's only where the city would be asked to fund or resource the project in some part that we would need to understand the business case. Important to stress, this report tonight does not suggest nor recommend the city not consider a proposal for the project. Simply put, it just identifies the matters of importance that any subsequent proposal would need to address to allow the city to assess the proposal in a timely fashion. And finally, the city does not disregard the tourism and economic development potential of the project. It certainly does not disregard that, but does need to balance this against the issues identified in this report. So the recommendation is the council notes these issues and we provide them to the proponent for their subsequent actions.
Questions, councillors? Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Director, for the report and the work that's gone into it, which is quite thorough. So it is appreciated. You've highlighted around 23 general major constraints, starting with the authority, state and federal authorities. It's my understanding that the federal regulator, the Office of the National Railway Safety Regulator, has to vet and approve, including business cases. Do you know that to be the case?
We understand the role of the rail regulator. We've in fact only identified issues to do with, in terms of regulatory approvals regarding access on roads.
Okay, thank you. So I guess if a proponent was to go and undertake a full business case, one of the first things they would do is, I guess they would want the local authority to have a position of no objection to the investigation on any technical grounds. So we haven't really got there yet. Is it possible? I'm not really sure how much in terms of resources was used to get to this point, but if the proponent was to work through, let's say, 3 or 4 of the biggest items, could they effectively, if they could be dealt with, could they be struck off this major constraints list?
I'd suggest that's a hypothetical question, Councillor.
Yeah.
I'm not in a position to respond whether or not the city can devote resources to the project any further.
Just a follow-up question. So, just roughly, in terms of resources, either dollar amount or officer hours time, how much was used to get to this this level here, roughly?
Thank you. Through the chair, the broad issues and the sort of commentary that was raised was developed over a workshop over a day with all parts of the city, and then the time to prepare, collate and present the report.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Ritchie.
Thanks. Through the chair, yes, but I'm just wondering if you could flick up back the slide before with the list of that one. Yeah, the most significant matters. I'm just wondering, the one that doesn't appear for me, and I guess it would happen anyway, I guess, but the notion of the community opinion about this, the notion of what the local residents actually think about that is, I know it's mentioned elsewhere, but to me it would be one of the most significant matters. I'm just wondering if you'd give consideration to that as listing it possibly as one of the most significant matters.
Thank you. Through the chair, obviously the most significant matters are just for tonight's presentation. All the matters are listed in the attachment to the report, and the recommendation is all those matters are then presented to the proponent for their consideration. And you will note from the attachment the very last issue is community sentiment. We've put in the issue that the city would need to understand the sentiment of the community towards this project. It is recognised that a much larger population than the city of Kalamunda may be supportive of this project. However, the views of the local community are largely unknown, and what we're proposing that the proponent provide is to include feedback from community engagement on the project as part of any proposal. At the very least, attitudes of the community should be able to be sorted by suburb in order to determine local versus broader community feedback.
Just to follow, I wasn't suggesting it wasn't there. I suppose I was just looking about the most significant matters. I certainly wasn't suggesting it wasn't there.
Are there any other questions?
Through the chair, I have received a deputation in writing from Mr Glade Pike in relation to this item. He can't be here tonight. He did say he would come next week. In his absence, with your permission, could I read out his deputation? Okay, so Mr Glade Pike is an engineer and has spent many, many years working on railways throughout Asia, Africa and in Australia. He is a local resident as well. He's written to me to say, "Dear Rhonda, thank you for the opportunity to comment on the document 10.4.6 concerning the Zigzag Railway Restoration Proposal. It appears to cover most perceivable issues. May I suggest the following additions? The scope of the proposal should be extended to include the original Kalamunda to Pickering Brook railway line. Project issues and major constraints. Item, the impact of existing flora and fauna within the old railway reserve. Action for proponent to add careful consideration to be given to adopting a smaller rail gauge such as a 2-foot inch or 610mm to reduce the impact upon obviously flora and fauna throughout those that railway reserve. He will be, Mr Pike will be attending the ordinary council meeting if for further questions next week. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? If not, that is the end of the public agenda briefing, and I just want to thank councillors for indulging me and listening to that presentation from the Kalamunda Primary School. Is there a question from the gallery?
Yes, please.
Sure, regarding...
Yes, my name's Peter Bolden. I'm part of I'm chair of the Zigzag Railway not-for-profit organisation. Yes, I'd like to thank the council and the council staff who put this response together. We actually did make a quick response to that to provide information, not a detailed response. And my question is, more of a statement to a certain extent, is unlike our artist colleagues, we are happy to work with the council free of charge to progress this project. We're not in it for the money, we're in it for the benefit of Kalamunda. We will work for nothing. We have years of expertise, which we wouldn't expect a council to have. And we're happy to share this expertise. So my question is to you is, just name the time and date if you want to work through these issues. We'll be there free of charge, and we'll be happy to help. So that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Is there any other comments or questions? Okay, I'll declare this public agenda briefing closed. Thank you so much, Councillor.